course, in the heat of the summer in most of the United States, surrounded by constant reports of bizarre weather. I don't have to go into details. Most of you have seen examples of it on the Internet and in the mainstream media as well. It's a hot one. Certainly a hot one again tonight on the program. Benjamin Fulford, 46.
Hello.
Hi, Ben. Hang on. Let me do the brief intro here, then we'll get right to you. For our listeners who don't know, Mr. Fulford is a Tokyo-based journalist who appeared on this program July the 5th, 2007, making some very radical and some would say hopeful claims. According to Benjamin Fulford, a Chinese secret society with 6 million members, including 1.8 million Asian gangsters and 100,000 professional assassins, have targeted Illuminati members if they proceed with world depopulation plans. A subject we've talked about for many years on this program, off and on. That is the depopulation effort, Global 2000 among others. They contacted Ben Fulford, a Canadian expatriate, after he warned that the Illuminati planned to reduce the Asian population to about 500 million people, about 500 million, by means of racial or genetic-specific biological weapons, was an issue to them. Remember SARS? Well, in his first conversation, SARS was pointed out by Ben Fulford as being quite likely an Asia-specific or ethno-specific weapon, a biological weapon, which I noticed actually when it happened and broke out in the Orient and made its way here to Canada, when in a Canadian newspaper they published all the photographs of the fatal SARS victims in Canada, about 95% of which were Asian, and I immediately said there's something suspicious about that and drew some conclusions which may well be true. With Ben Fulford as their spokesman now, the word is out. The Asia Secret Society, Chinese, is taking on the Illuminati. At least that's the story. Tonight, in part 2 of our exclusive conversation with Benjamin Fulford, we're going to cover many new issues and expand on some earlier ones as well. I'll also open the phones a bit later on for your questions. As you might well imagine, Mr. Fulford's first visit here rattled and rumbled its way around the world on the Internet and continues to do so tonight. It's also an appearance you can hear for free at Rense.com right now. You can also read all of the stories relating to that first visit on July the 5th and several essays written by Mr. Fulford himself. As you also may recall, he was the Asia-Pacific Bureau Chief for 8 years for Forbes magazine and remains a professional journalist, as I said, based in Tokyo, Japan, where we go now to say hello and welcome back to Benjamin Fulford. Thanks for being here, Ben.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. An honor.
Pleasure is mine, sir, and we covered so many things last time. There are a lot of things to go over tonight. We're going to try and bring many of those into further focus, delineate on some, elaborate on others. One of the things that intrigued me, and when you mentioned it, I was certainly one of maybe millions who began to look up on Google or other search engines information about your great-grandfather, G.T. Fulford. That was fascinating to hear about his interest and support and apparent friendship with Nikola Tesla. He was apparently murdered. He died in an automobile accident, and I think it was 1905. Is that the year of his death?
Yes, it was.
There sure as hell weren't a lot of cars around in 1905, and one wonders.
I believe it was the first fatal car accident in Canadian history, although it took place in Massachusetts.
Bizarre. And cars back then didn't do much more than 25 miles an hour, I wouldn't think.
Yeah. There was an erratic driver who was, given 1 week's notice, and he somehow managed to crash it through my great-grandfather into a horse-drawn bus while he himself stayed perfectly safe.
He struck your grandfather with the car?
Well, no, he managed to get the car to hit a horse-drawn bus in such a way that, only my great-grandfather died.
A horse-drawn bus.
Yes.
Now, that's something that I've seen in photographs, old photographs, of course. This is even more bizarre. Now, at the time, your grandfather was a very wealthy man. He was not very old either. Was he 50 years old? 45 or 50?
And he was, like I said, he was the largest shareholder in General Electric, and he was about to buy a company that we know of today as General Motors.
And he had made his fortune, as I recall reading, in patenting of early medicines, so-called modern medicines.
Yeah, this big hit was something called Fulford's Pink Pills for Pale People, which is basically iron tablets, but in those days everyone had anemia because of the new food processing technology.
Now with all the iron added to food, some people have overdoses of iron, so...
Right, but in those days they'll have anemia. Another sort of spooky thing about him, and this is something that makes you wonder, but the longest-serving prime minister in Canadian history was Mackenzie King. And he was prime minister for more than 20 years and is considered to be a very good prime minister. And when he died, they found his diaries. And his diaries, they found out he made his political decisions by consulting a crystal ball and consulting spirits.
I shouldn't laugh because the Reagans did much the same, of course. Nancy Reagan, it is said, had an awful lot of input from her psychic in San Francisco.
Yeah, but the other thing is that his psychic was my great-grandmother.
Oh, really?
And the person he was consulting was my great-grandfather, among others.
And the crystal ball was just a little trinket?
They're supposed to hypnotize yourself so you can get in touch with the spirit world, something like that. Yeah.
So run that by me again. Your great-grandmother was the psychic that he consulted, and your great-grandfather was, well...
the spirit that he was getting advice from.
Now, when you say spirit, are you talking about spirit after your grandfather was killed?
Yes, I'm talking about the 1930s and 40s.
How strange. And this went on for a long time, apparently, and this was in his private diary.
Yeah. So it's one of those more bizarre... he'd also wait until midnight on Friday the 13th to make important decisions.
Well, that's good. Why not? Well, we have a lot of precedents, and it is also a fact that many, if not most, now a lot of you may wince at this, major corporations and businesses actually do consult with psychics, and some actually have some on the payroll, and they won't make a major decision without clearing it with the psychic. And, astrology is used, of course. It's not crystal ball necessarily, technology. But that's fascinating. I didn't know. Tell me a little bit more if there is any.
Well, the other thing was that they're supposed to look at the first dream of the night, and that's supposed to be predictive. But a lot of this was taught to me by my grandmother, and I think that all the rich people use fortune tellers because it's sort of like, forget about anything psychic, but it's like people want to know what's going to happen in the future. They have it for oil markets, for example, oil futures or something. And it's just a way of predicting or looking forward into the future, and they discourage that in us, right? But, if it rains up in the mountains, then you can predict the river will flow higher later. There's a lot of stuff you can predict about the future that's based on, on hard science. But they try to discourage us from looking into the future. But big corporations and rich people all do that. Right. There's $5,000 an hour psychics out there.
Sure. Now, no, I've heard it. We've talked about that for many years. It is true that as a culture, young people are immediately jumped upon and thwarted when they start to report so-called psychic experiences, whether they see colors around people, whether they talk to spirits, whether they have spirit or invisible friends. In fact, in Britain, by the way, there was a major paper out, just as a quick aside here, last week I posted it, maybe you saw it, that young children are now apparently or the advice to the parents is that the young children be encouraged when they talk about having invisible playmates and invisible friends. So, very interesting indeed.
In any case, I want to talk a bit more about the Rockefellers.
Sure, I'm sure they're listening, so go right ahead.
Yeah, okay, well, look, this is a vital issue. For years, the Japanese were telling me that, the West was ruled like a monarchy by the Rockefellers, right? Yeah. And I'm thinking, these people are, these are superstitious Orientals. And they're thinking, these Westerners are so blackmailed, they don't even, so brainwashed, they don't even know they're brainwashed, right? So I finally started doing the research, and I found out that, for example, just to prepare for this show, I went and met a senior boss of the Yamaguchi-gumi crime syndicate, okay? This is 100,000, they control most of the gangsters in Japan.